Welcome, LA Progressive, friends and family. Dick and I joining you again today with a gentleman who has so generously shared his mind and his intellect with us. He continues to offer mind expansive information to the LA Progressive. His name is Henry Giroux. He currently holds the McMaster University Chair for Scholarship in the Public Interest in the English and Cultural Studies Department and is the Paulo Freire Distinguished Scholar in Critical Pedagogy. His latest book, co-authored with Anthony DiMaggio, is Fascism on Trial: Education and the Possibility of Democracy. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you. By the way, my latest book is actually called The Burden of Conscience.
Thank you for
Oh, we'll
correcting that.
we'll fix
The
that.
burden of conscience, and we'll put an image and a link to that.
Oh, thanks.
So we as Sharon says, we love getting together with you. We love receiving your articles. We love these conversations, and we love getting out your work to our LA Progressive audience, which we know really appreciates it. So recently you wrote an article you titled "Rhythms of Resistance and Democracy's Unfinished Song." And today, as Bibi Netanyahu visits Congress to gloat about his backing by Trump's crazy plan to decimate Gaza entirely, you quote, this is a quote, "This is not policy, it is lunacy draped in empire, a death wish spoken aloud, a nightmare clawing its way into daylight." Very poetic. Can you comment on what Trump's plans for Gaza, for Panama, for Greenland, for Canada signify?
I think that what we're seeing is the resurgence of a kind of colonialism, coupled with, it seems to me, an unadulterated hatred of anything that resembles democracy. And I think that there are a number of forces at work here that in some way, I think we need to put together to explain exactly what that means. I mean, historically, it means that the language of extermination is back. And it's now draped in a discourse that is as cruel as it is crude, totally removed from any sense of social responsibility. But I think that what we're beginning to see is the emergence of something new. And that is, we're seeing a captive state shackled to white supremacy and white Christian nationalism. And this is a full spectrum attack in some ways on anything that resembles the public commons or any institutions that dares to cultivate a form of critical thought or any mechanism that might hold power to account. So this is more than just simply a politics of disposability. This is fascism coupled with a new sense of power. And that power is a state now completely controlled by billionaires. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a new paradigm here, one that we saw remnants of in Mussolini's Italy. We saw some of it, of course, we saw it in Pinochet's Chile, that's for sure. And we saw it, of course, in Nazi Germany. But I think that what we see now is we see an overwhelming reach of power so inordinately boisterous of its death-like machinery and its corruption and greed that it's not just, it's international. This is an international movement. And the merging of these two war criminals basically proved that with their gloating sneers, you know, and their just ugly postures and their overburdened cruelty. Just hard to watch. Never mind listen to or understand.
So this piece that you contributed that is entitled Rhythms of Resistance and Democracy's Unfinished Song, it's a lengthy piece. It's really goes in depth, but it's so beautifully written because these are difficult times. And the reason that I place emphasis on the fact that it's beautifully written is that if you are immersed in this kind of work, you've got to find a way to express it in ways that are palatable and this just don't make you want to take a gun to your head. So I want to read a paragraph that, and then I want you to comment on it. You say this revival is not new. It is a return to the primal politics of racial supremacy, a resurrection of the Confederacy's racist dreamscape and Hitler's exterminationist fantasies wrapped in the cheap spectacle of modern media, adorned with symbols of fear and irrationality, repurposed for an era of digital despotism. It is a fascism that has learned to entertain, to seduce through spectacle, to smuggle its violence beneath the skin of amusement. And I've often said that Americans are overly entertained and underinformed and undereducated. So let's talk about this smuggling it, this violence between the skin of amusement.
I mean, I think that what we're seeing here, whether it be in the right-wing podcast or the sneering manosphere, allegedly, or basically even in the legacy press, there are a couple of things going on. One is the news now focuses on the spectacle without the stenographers. The spectacle takes over. Violence is there in a way that completely decontextualizes it. And so it serves to mobilize certain kinds of emotions that represent the death knell of entertainment, an entertainment that doesn't amuse, but an entertainment that kills any sense of conscience. The other side of this is that this is a fascist aesthetic. And I think we need to understand that. It's about the pornography of power. It's about using every element of the media, which is really the new cultural apparatus of repression. And let's be honest. I mean, the exceptions of programs like this, the marginal media, young people who are producing their own media. But overall, 5 companies control the media in the United States. I don't know what it is in the world, but it's probably no less than 7 or 8. But it seems to me that what we're seeing a way in which the only emotion left that seems to be mobilized by this fascist pornography is an emotion in which hatred and violence get dressed up as comedy, in some ways get dressed up as funny racist slurs. It's sort of like last night when the media is reporting about how one of these guys these little teen boys who now work for Elon Musk, all of a sudden they find out he's an outright racist. And he says, I was a racist before it was fashionable. I love that line. It just really sums up what I'm talking about here. Now it's fashionable to be a racist. Now it's fashionable to say, your body, my choice. Now, right? Now it's fashionable to basically talk about eliminating 2.2 million people in Gaza and saying that this will be the Riviera of the Middle East. I mean, my God, how does one enter into this conversation without recognizing that you're dealing with political psychopaths who are using all the money they can get to capture this state, to destroy the foundations of what would be a democratic or a democracy or a democratic state? So I think in trying to merge those elements, what I'm making clear is this is not just a sterile language that is produced by the death machine or the machineries of death. This is a language that captures subjectivity. This is a language that captures people's emotions. This is a language that turns what could be a joyous dance and celebration of democracy into a dance of hatred, bigotry, and death.
Yeah, so right.
So in your piece, you talk of Etta James, your admiration for Etta James. You say, first heard Etta James in a cramped basement apartment at a party with my black high school teammates. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. What effect did her singing have on you as a young boy? And what sort of resistance to our current times does she suggest?
Let me tell you something. I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to date myself in doing it. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, in a working class family. I was a shoe shine boy at 10. And I used to go to all the black clubs and shine there because that's the neighborhood I lived in. And at that time, there were black and white radio stations. And I used to hear Pat Boone singing Tutti Frutti. and then I heard Little Richard sing Tutti Frutti in the clubs. And then I heard Etta James. And I was a member of the CYO, the Catholic Youth Organization at that time, in which we had dances, and the nuns, as I say in the piece, if you got too close to who you were dancing with, they would say, make room for the Blessed Virgin Mary. Then I went to, I was a basketball player. I was on a state championship team, and most of my teammates were black. And one night I went to, they invited me to one of their parties, and in that dark room in a cellar, my life changed. All of a sudden I heard music that was alive, and the first song I heard was "Fool That I Am" by
Oh,
Etta
great
James.
song. That's a great.
Man, I fell in love, and I never left. When as a shoeshine boy, I used to come up a hill, and there was a black church, and I used to sit in the back of that church and listen to the music. And I'll tell you, it undid the racism that I had learned in that neighborhood. It
Mm.
took me to a place where the body danced and the mind couldn't refuse the music.
Mm.
And that seems to me in that piece to be a place where there's hope, where
Wow.
justice can be mobilized.
I never heard it expressed that way. You know, I was raised on that music.
Oh,
James, Etta Jones,
yes.
Holiday, Sarah Vaughan. I mean, that music was playing. That's the backdrop of my childhood and teenage years. But I found myself having to cut out some of the music because it really was not socially uplifting. And
Yeah.
like Billie Holiday would sing a song, "Give me a pig foot and a bottle of beer, swing me daddy, I don't care,
Yeah.
bring out your." But I really was moved by Strange Fruit. And you talk
Oh,
about Billie Holiday and the impact that she had. And I just want to just drop this in because we're taping this, that Billie Holiday was persecuted throughout her entire career by the FBI because she refused to drop Strange Fruit, which is the song about lynching in the South or lynching throughout the United States. Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative has shown us that lynching went on throughout the United
oh
States.
yeah.
Because she refused to drop that from her repertoire, the FBI persecuted her till her dying day. And that song was written by Abel Meeropol, who adopted the children of the adopted father of the Rosenbergs, the two sons who were left orphans because of our execution of both of their parents. So that song just, it always moves me, and it moves me to take action. And so thank you for bringing that.
I think first of all, I can imagine how lucky you were, like myself, to have that music sort of touch you in a way that said if your body can't dance, the revolution isn't going on, right? Uh, but the other side of that is that, we often look at entertainers as simply celebrities.
Mhm.
And what we often miss is in that music and in that passion, there's a song that far exceeds what might be seen as entertainment. There's a yearning, there's a desire. As my friend Cornel West says, the blues saves us, right? We're not just complaining. It's a space we can occupy in some fundamental way. And I say that as a white boy. I mean, because that space is open. That space has to be occupied with a certain degree of critical reflection and an understanding that you're not just being entertained, you're being re-educated. That's a different issue. And I
That's
and I think that for me, that spirit is so at odds with a spirit that now dominates this corpse-like blood-filled mouths of these parasites who now parade as zombie politicians, that it has to be resurrected. The music has to be played. The era has to be remembered. The bodies have to be understood. You have to understand how it mobilized the civil rights movement. You have to understand the role that music played in gay rights, in the women's movement. We have to understand that they never let go of a kind of passion in which they danced to the possibility of hope and justice. So it seems to me that for that piece, that's what I was trying to say. Whether I said it adequately enough, I don't know.
good. It's good. And then Nina Simone and her Mississippi
Uh,
Goddamn.
oh, man. I'll tell you, every Friday night I open a bottle of wine and I put that music on every Friday night. And I'll tell you, it nourishes me.
So you're in your piece, you indicate that Trump is the figurehead for a moment that revives Confederacy's racist dreamscape and Hitler's extermination fantasies. And as bad as January was, and we're just 3 weeks into the official outrage, what further outrages can we expect?
I mean, understand what the strategy is. The strategy is called flooding the zone.
Right.
And basically, he will try to tear down every institution that in some fundamental way could hold power accountable. He knows he's going to lose in a lot of these. He knows that. But that isn't the point, is it? The point is for him to be able to instill a kind of collective fear and misery over people's jobs, over their hope for justice, over democracy that will wear them away. This is a policy, a death-like policy of wearing people away. This is a corpse. This Trump is a corpse. He's lost his breath. Everything is now just pushing the nonsense forward, just so you can overwhelm people. But as we're seeing, federal workers, people who have U.S. aid, my God, to try to eliminate U.S. aid. I mean, a small percentage of the budget, but what it does for poor people all over the world. And to have this pathological techno-lunatic who is as stupid politically as he is ethically dead, mobilizing these squads of teen nerds to invade and appropriate, all the information that is relevant to both national security and our personal lives. This is desperation. Don't be fooled by this. This is desperation. This is not just a takeover of power. This is a political system that cannot legitimate itself. It can't do it. So all it has left right now is fear, intimidation, and what's next will be brute force. Trust me, that's coming.
That's coming.
And we see it, of course, with undocumented immigrants. We see it with people of color. We see it with the increasing paramilitarization of the police. It's coming. And I think at that point, this system is going to snap. It'll snap.
Yeah, we just interviewed Lawrence Wilkerson, who was Colin Powell's chief of staff and worked closely with Colin Powell for, 30 years. And he told us a story that I was completely unaware of. It was a story about the 1992 civil unrest in Los Angeles and how President at the time, George W. Bush.
H.W. Bush.
H.W. Bush?
Yeah.
Oh, H.W. Bush was going to send in the military to control what was happening out here in Los Angeles after the Rodney King incident and the civil unrest. And Colin Powell heard that H.W. Bush was sending in the troops, and Colin Powell got up and went to talk to the president and insisted and conveyed to the president that he should not allow the troops to use fatal power and then he talked about the Black community and what's happening in the Black community in terms of lack of economic opportunities and so on. And I was surprised. And then the president quickly changed and told them that they were not to use lethal force unless they had to protect their own selves. And they didn't use lethal force. But I was really surprised that the original plan was to use lethal force. And so if that was H.W. Bush's plan, imagine Trump.
Right.
Dick, you had raised that question earlier about the flag of the Confederacy.
Right.
I don't use that word lightly. I mean, these are people who really embody the ideology of the Confederacy.
Yes.
And let's go back to what Sharon had talked about. This is the ideology of lynching, metaphorically and literally. Literally in that ICE is everywhere. People are being beaten up. People are being put in buses. People are being put in planes that cost an enormous amount of money.
And they're being shackled.
And they're being shackled.
In the plane.
I mean, images of people of color being shackled in the 21st century. The other side of this is that one of the things that always struck me as interesting about the fascists, the Nazis, captured in that film recently that won an Academy Award. What was the name of it? About the house outside of Auschwitz, where the German family, was completely indifferent to the smokestacks and everything that was going on.
The boy in striped pajamas, is that?
No. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of it. But the thing that's so interesting about that film that becomes very obvious today is the death-like lack of empathy that people like Trump have. In other words, they have so inhabited a moral void that the question of pain, the question of suffering, the question of misery, the question of compassion, the question of justice, the question of love, these are meaningless terms to them, except to be denigrated. You understand that? To be denigrated. That it's, I mean, they represent a form of weakness. So when they say, like Orban, you know, when they say mixed races is what's at the root of the failure of democracy. My God. I mean, that's like saying we should kill deformed children as Hitler did, right? When he first came to power. So we don't want to underestimate here a system that has been so cruel, both in terms of its colonialism, its slavery, and its lack of empathy, and its belief that you can separate all activity, including economic activity, from social cost.
Mm-hmm.
That's the death of moral responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's reached its endpoint, which is it can't justify itself anymore in market terms. Oh, life will get better. There'll be more jobs. There'll be upward mobility. That's dead. It's suffering a legitimation crisis. All it has left is destruction, force, and the mobilization of a machinery of utter death and cruelty. That's all it has left. There's nothing else.
So a concern about this is as Trump's folks send ICE thugs out every week to a different set of cities, the cruelty across the board is going to get normalized. It's going to be, well, that's how ICE operates, you know, as the weeks go on, because we're not mounting any kind of significant resistance.
You know, actually, Dick, I'm not sure that's true, because all over the country right now, people are mobilizing around ICE and where it ends up, and telling people to lock their doors. They're getting legal advice. There are people in the neighborhoods screaming at them. As a matter of fact, you know, they hired Fox News and others to follow them into certain neighborhoods. They had to stop because there were people in the neighborhoods with megaphones saying, "Go home, you pigs," you know, and telling people to lock their doors. So the movement is really mounting. I mean, there are mass demonstrations in almost every major city right now in the United States over, of course, the abduction of security files, social security files, and things like that. So I'm not so sure I don't think it's getting normalized. I don't think it can be normalized because I think it's too extreme. And I think that Dick, there is a point where I really believe a red line is crossed and something changes in people's heads. You know, when all of a sudden you could be, when you're a farmer in Oregon or Kansas, and you discover that because USAID is being shut down, you have just lost your job because USAID buys an enormous amount of wheat from American farmers, and exactly 51,000 people will be out of work. So I'm not so sure. I have more hope around the question of resistance. Normalization, no. There's no attempt to normalize any of this. That your argument, I think, says as it goes on, people will take it for granted. It won't be taken for granted because it's going to get worse.
Well, I hope you're right and I'm wrong. I hope you're right and I'm wrong, and that's wonderful news to hear. I will say though that Mussolini, Hitler, Pinochet, Franco, their realms went on quite a while with a lot of cruelty spread over a long period of time.
I don't think the issue is it's going to end tomorrow. And that would be silly for me to even suggest that. I think this is a long struggle, to say the very least, and I think a lot of damage will be done. But no regime like this will last that long. History tells us that. The other side of this is that news spreads in a way, and power that's oppressive is uncovered in a way that we've never seen before with the media. We've never seen that. You know, I mean, now these kids, young people are so smart. They get stuff out so fast that all of a sudden we're back in that era when, of course, we saw that napalm child, you know, walking down the road, and all of a sudden it changed the course of history, right? It changed the course of the protests against the Vietnam War. And I mean, all we have to think about is Palestine. I mean, and what's happened in Gaza. Israel can't defend itself anymore in light of the images that have come out of Gaza. It's impossible in a way that really speaks to winning over the international community. That's only in the U.S. I mean, Netanyahu has now been declared a war criminal. And I think in years to come, Biden will probably be declared a war criminal as well for what he did. But I think that I have more hope. I think the cracks are pretty obvious, and I think the resistance will be pretty strong. But I think I do want to say one thing. This and you'll get it in the piece I sent you today. This has to be direct action. We have to stop thinking about simply raising consciousness. That's crucial. But things have to be shut down. They have to, and this has to be done non-violently. You have to shut down the schools. You've got to shut down, it seems to me, the economic foundation of a country that thrives on corruption and greed. The workers can do this. They can do it. The auto workers, the dock workers, they could do it in a week. And they have to realize that what's at stake is their livelihood, their families, their children's future, and democracy itself.
Wow. Well, we couldn't end on a more important note. Communicating this information is so important. And Henry, we thank you for providing this information, but now we encourage people who can hear this. Please share it. Please copy it. Please post it. Whether you share it on social media, you're sharing it via YouTube, sharing this is the only way that people can understand how urgent it is that we come together. So thank you, Henry.
Okay.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.